Hey, welcome to Home Video Hangouts. I'm Cody, and in today's video, I wanted to share with you 10 movies that aren't worth the upgrade to 4K. As a physical media collector, I love collecting 4K movies. They're some of my favorite kind of movies to both collect and watch. And with that being said, there are some that either I've gotten and been disappointed with, or that I've heard from a lot of people aren't worth the upgrade. And so I wanted to go over some of the details of these movies with you that I've determined are not really worth the upgrade and why. And so let me know in the comments as well if you agree with some of these or if you have any other suggestions of movies that aren't worth the upgrade. But let's dive right into it. Alright, so number one on the list is Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. So I watched this movie on Blu-ray as well as 4K, and I realized that both the Blu-ray release and the 4K release are very similar. They both have Dolby Atmos tracks, which that's really incredible for the regular Blu-ray release. And while the 4K release does potentially have a little bit better resolution, there's no real standout difference in color, vibrancy, or anything that I saw. And so I would say if you can get the awesome Atmos track from the Blu-ray copy, there's not really much point in getting the potentially more expensive 4K copy. And so, of course, there are some exceptions, or maybe if you found the 4K copy on sale, might as well get it because it could be worth it. But I would say with this one, it really does make sense just to get the regular Blu-ray because you're still getting essentially the same thing, especially if you have a Blu-ray player that upscales regular Blu-rays to 4K quality, then you probably are going to get the best experience that way. And so with that being said, that leads right into our second one, which is Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. Basically the same thing happened here where the Blu-ray is just as good as the 4K. I didn't really notice any enhancements that were meaningful on the 4K release, and I think you're better off saving some money getting the Blu-ray release and then using an upscaling Blu-ray player to watch that. Again, there's the Dolby Atmos track on the regular Blu-ray, and I was very much impressed with the Atmos track on this movie as well. I think it had some great scenes for Dolby Atmos, and I think that any very small benefits that might be there on the 4K release are not worth it. And so it's unfortunate that they didn't do more to enhance the 4K releases here, but at least this could be an opportunity for you to save some money if you're a fan of the Hunger Games series and just stick with the Blu-rays. All right, now this next one on the list may be a little more controversial. It is the movie 300. Now this is an awesome movie that I really enjoy. Great action movie, great kind of historical war movie, and I think when this one came out, you know, it got a lot of fanfare. It was a really incredible movie to watch in terms of the action sequences. But when I watched this on the 4K release, I couldn't believe how much grain was in this movie. It really took away from the movie, in my opinion. I know part of that was kind of on purpose to be part of the aesthetic of the movie and the look that this movie has, but I personally see no reason to get the 4K release when there's this much grain in the movie. Sure, the resolution is good, the color is good, and there's a great soundtrack, but I think with the level of grain that's here, I think the 4K release almost makes that worse. And I'm not someone who is a fan of having a ton of heavy grain in a movie of any type. So for that reason, I somewhat regret getting the 4K release of this movie and am very happy with the Blu-ray release for it. So this could be another one where it's a good opportunity to save some money, stick with the Blu-ray release, and upscale that if you want to, versus getting the actual 4K release. All right, in the number 4 spot would be Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This isn't the original one that I'm referring to. This would be the one, the kind of second one that came out that I believe was around the late 70s, if I remember right. I had the 4K release of this one, and it wasn't a bad 4K release. This is somewhat of a good release. It's just that I personally don't see the expense of upgrading being worth it with this one, being that there is still a decent Blu-ray release as well. And you know, this is another one where some people may disagree with me here, but I just didn't see enough of an upgrade here to justify the price, because this is one 4K release that could be kind of expensive too in some cases. And so if you're able to find a good deal on it, it's not a bad one, but I don't think that the soundtrack here is really worth the upgrade or the visuals. I think there isn't a resolution improvement, and you may appreciate that, being this is an older film. And but again, there is still some grain there, and I don't really see enough color enhancement to really make it an incredible looking 4K. So not really one that I would see as incredibly worth it, but you may disagree. Just wanted to throw this one in there as one of the slightly not worth it ones for me. All right, next one on the list is widely known to not be a good 4K release. I do have it. I haven't watched the 4K release myself yet, but I've heard nothing but bad things about it so far. That is Pirates of the Caribbean, the original movie. And so this one I've heard is way too dark on the 4K release and doesn't look good for that reason. And I've heard the Blu-ray looks a lot better. So this one will kind of tie into what I talk about in the 10th item on our list today, but just want to say this would likely be one you want to avoid, even though I haven't actually tested it myself, and your TV settings may make this vary. I've heard that this really isn't worth the upgrade. I still got it myself because I got it inexpensively, didn't have the movie already, but I've heard this one is just based on the coloring, it's not worth the upgrade, and you actually may get worse image quality by getting the 4K for this one. And very similarly on the list in number 6 is Terminator 2. I love the whole Terminator series, a lot of great movies in there, great performances from Arnold Schwarzenegger, but unfortunately the 4K release for Terminator 2 is not very good. There have been a variety of 4K releases from what I understand for Terminator 2, so there may be one out there that is better than the others, or maybe some different region ones are better, but for most of the releases that I've heard about, I've heard that it's not worth getting over the Blu-ray. I've heard of some issues with them in terms of skipping, poor quality, all kinds of problems with Terminator 2. And so this is one that I'll never be getting for my own collection unless they come out with a better release that I've heard a lot of good reviews on. So this is another one that I would say it's widely known to just stay away from this one. All right, number 7 on the list is another movie I enjoy, but I don't think is quite worth the upgrade, and that is Training Day. This is an early 2000s movie where that time period is not usually the best for 4K releases based on how they were filmed. And this one I thought, looked all right, but wasn't really any different from what I'd expect from a regular Blu-ray or even an upscale DVD in some cases. So I can't really recommend you pick this one up. It just, again, it has a little bit of that grain. Didn't really seem like there's many enhancements to the audio or the visual quality here. No great use of HDR or anything like that. So this is one where I would say you're better off just saving your money and sticking with a lower end release for that one. All right, number 8 on the list is going to be Donnie Darko. Now, this is an interesting one because I watched the Arrow 4K release for this one, and usually Arrow puts out some really incredible 4K releases, but this one was kind of off, in my opinion. This one was way too dark in a lot of sequences, it seemed like to me, and the audio was pretty off in some places, didn't sound right, and there's just a lot of issues with coloring in this one. And so even though Arrow typically makes incredible releases, I was not a fan of this one at all. And I'm not a big fan of the movie itself either after watching it for the first time, but I know there's this kind of a cult classic. A lot of people do love this movie, and I think that Arrow could have done a better job with this one. But this is one where, especially being that Arrow releases are expensive, I'd really try to save your money on this one because I don't think you're going to be super happy with the upgrade for Donnie Darko. All right, number 9 on the list is Collateral. I really enjoyed watching this movie for the first time for the plot and the actors in it and everything. But the 4K release, again, to me, kind of like with Training Day, looked like a standard Blu-ray or maybe even upscale DVD. And so not happy when that happens, when I get a 4K and the quality is somewhat mediocre like that. So again, I just don't see a compelling reason to upgrade here. So if you're a fan of this movie, you're probably better off the Blu-ray as again, I didn't see any incredible HDR use. I didn't notice a big improvement from the audio track on this one, and I think you might as well just save your money there. Now, last on the list in number 10 is not just an individual movie, but a certain type of movie, and that is most Marvel and Disney movies. So Marvel and Disney movies are known for not having the best 4K releases. While I do appreciate that they are still doing physical media releases when they have Disney Plus, they could just decide to stop doing them. A lot of the time, they're not putting the IMAX format onto the 4Ks, even if Disney Plus has them, or they release that way in a theater. And a lot of times, these don't have any significant improvement over a Blu-ray release when they put them out on 4K, or if they do, it's very minor. And in some cases, we're actually seeing better releases on Disney Plus than on a 4K if it's one of the movies that got the IMAX format on Disney Plus. And that's really unfortunate when something like that happens, where a streaming service actually has better quality than a 4K disc. And so, there may be some exceptions here, individual movies that do look a little bit better on the 4K format than streaming with Disney, but most of these movies are not going to be worth it, and there are some terrible releases out there too, like with Pirates of the Caribbean. But a lot of the Marvel movies, for example, are not typically worth it. Star Wars movies, I would say that one's debatable, but for the most part, you're probably better off getting a Blu-ray, saving some money, and then upscaling that, just because it seemed like not a lot of effort is going into Disney's 4K releases, unfortunately. And I think also when it comes to animated films, it's harder even with a good 4K release to notice as much of a difference between Blu-ray and 4K with those, as even a Blu-ray usually looks really clear. Those types of movies don't have grain typically. And I would say there are some standout animated movies I've seen that you have such great use of color and HDR to where I really do notice a bigger difference with the 4K. Like for example, with the release of Coraline, that's a great animated movie to watch on 4K. But for the most part, I would say generally Disney movies are not going to be worth it on the 4K format as a whole. Alright, so that wraps up our top 10 movies not worth the upgrade to 4K. I do highly encourage you to try some of these on your own still if you're unsure, and I highly encourage you to still continue to upgrade some of your collection to 4K. I made another video where I talked about some of the best movies I've seen on 4K that are very much worth the upgrade, so definitely focus in on those, but it's important to know that not every release is going to be good on 4K, and not every movie is worth upgrading to 4K. So it's important when you're building your collection to do your research before buying movies and make wise decisions on what format you're buying. Sometimes even 4Ks from different regions will look better than the 4K in the region that you're in, so keep that in mind too. But let me know in the comments down below how you feel about this, if there's any films that you regret upgrading to 4K. And also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below to stay updated on the latest videos I have releasing. And thanks for all your support on the channel.